Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for allowing me to be part of CommuteCon. This is very exciting. Just to give you a little bit more background about who I am, as Catherine mentioned, I have been in the TDM industry for about 25 years. For the better part of my career, I was an executive director of several TMAs in Massachusetts, but in 2012, went into the consulting world. So my firm provides TDM solutions to private sector companies, municipalities, and nonprofits. Particularly, we specialize in public-private partnerships and TMA formation. What I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today, just in my 10 minutes, I want to tell you a little bit about Massachusetts TMAs because I do think we're somewhat unique. I'm going to touch on how and why we collaborate as TMAs and what we can do as a service model with that, and then also just kind of highlight a recent success that we've done. So this slide speaks to the fact that there are 17 TMAs in Massachusetts, which I think most of you will agree is a lot. We represent about 400 businesses, including medical facilities, higher learning institutions, developers, property developers, and we represent about 52 municipalities. Just to give you a sense of where 17 TMAs puts us, we actually represent 10% of the TMAs in all of the United States are in Massachusetts. So there are a lot of us, and which is one of the reasons why we've chosen to kind of come together and collaborate on various initiatives. So why so many TMAs in Massachusetts? I think probably the foremost thing is we are very dense. So Massachusetts as a state has the 5th highest density of any state in the United States. And actually, I really put us at like number 3 because DC and Puerto Rico are in that mix. So obviously they're dense, they're much smaller, they're not really states in the sense that we think of states being. So Massachusetts is definitely up there in terms of density. So I think that helps to, having many TMAs kind of helps us to represent that density. Also, not just at a state level, but at a city level, we are super dense. So as you see on the chart on the right, Somerville is one of our communities that's just outside of Boston. And that actually happens to be the 16th most densely populated city in all of the United States. So we pack a lot of people into small places here in Massachusetts. So I think that has a little bit to do with why we have so many TMAs. We also have very distinct sort of neighborhoods and land uses, or at least we traditionally have, which has led to a lot of TMAs. We have a very specific medical district in Boston. We've always had a very specific sort of business core, similar to many other cities. But there's also a lot of personality and politics that comes into it. And then probably one of the biggest reasons I think we have so many TMAs and why we've really narrowed down on having TMAs at the neighborhood level is that Massachusetts doesn't have any regional or county government, which means a lot of the decisions around TDM and policies and permitting happens at the municipal or local level. That I think speaks a little bit to it. So in terms of the collaboration, these TMAs have basically come together to form a nonprofit. It began even before that in the early 90s. A few of the TMAs came together informally, sort of as a peer group to just kind of share thoughts and ideas. We did a few joint events together. But in 2005, we actually formed a separate nonprofit for TMAs in Massachusetts known as Masscommute. So we have an organization, essentially a joint association of TMAs. There's been a lot of benefits to doing the Masscommute model. I think the first and foremost is it gives us a unified voice, both in terms of advocacy and specifically in terms of funding for TMAs. Gives us a great economies of scale, which we'll get into in the example I'm going to give in a little bit, which is joint solutions, joint programming, and then also allows us to kind of have a coordinated message around the benefits of TDM through TMA. And this one just kind of speaks to what do I think is, why has the private-public partnership model of a TMA been a good delivery model in Massachusetts? Why do I think it's successful? The first is we're solving a problem. Massachusetts has the distinction of having the worst traffic. I think we beat LA the last 2 years in the United States. We also have a booming economy, or we did pre-COVID-19. Fingers crossed that comes back. And we also have the oldest transit system. So those three combined means that there's a real problem statement in terms of getting access and recruitment and access to jobs in the city. So I think the private sector definitely has looked to TMAs to kind of help them solve that problem. The second piece, I think, is development changes. So like many cities, we are sort of at capacity in our downtown core, and we've actually started to kind of move outside development rings, which is great. We're moving sort of businesses out of the outer core, but those businesses are not necessarily always connected to the trunk transit system that we have here in Massachusetts. So we see a lot of last mile, first mile deficiencies that TMAs are great at solving. And then the third piece, which I mentioned in my previous slide, is we really don't have a central funding source. We operate at the municipal level and the state level, and recently we've lost state funding. So a lot of our TDM in Massachusetts is done using private sector money, which a TMA is a great model to bring those private dollars together. So as I mentioned, we have state funding issues here in Massachusetts. Just the top three in the red are sort of historically how our funding has worked. So CMAQ money in the past has been given to TDM in Massachusetts. There were some DOER grants that allowed TMAs to do some programming and specifically some shuttles. And then for a number of years, for about 15 years, TMAs in Massachusetts were funded through CMAQ programming. Each TMA in the state got $50,000. In June of 2019, though, MassDOT eliminated all of our statewide commuter services program funding, so not just for TMAs, but also our Mass Rides program, which is the state program. You can see my little graphic over there. If you Google Mass Rides, there's a little permanently closed at the top there. So last year was really a year for the TMAs to start to really think about how we were going to go forward in terms of funding, because the state eliminated all of our funding. With that funding elimination also went our state ride matching database, which is the example I'm going to give you. Oh, sorry, Matt just said if I could say what TMA stand for. TMA stands for a Transportation Management Association. I probably should have talked a little bit about, for those of you who might not be familiar. It's basically a public-private partnership where groups of businesses in a particular area come together with the municipality to come up with TDM solutions and to fund TDM services. Thank you, Matt, for that heads up. So the story of this slide is we lost all of our state funding last year, and with it went our ride matching services. So one of the things that Masscommute came together on that was to see if we could come up with a solution where TMAs would be able to still provide ride matching services for our employers. Many of our members in TMAs are required either through municipal permitting or state DEP permitting to have ride matching capabilities to form carpools to do van pooling. And so the fact that we no longer had a state option that we were all using, that went away, meant we were in the position to kind of help our members come up with a solution. So we came up with the idea to do a joint license through Masscommute, and RideAmigos is our partner in that. This little cartoon, I think that guy in the hill is actually Matt. For those of you who know Matt, he's one of the key software developers here. So to say that it was a little bit of a monumental task to get, we have 13 of 17 TMAs on a platform through Mass with RideAmigos. Started this last year. Unlike county government, I think ride matching that way, central governing structure that, but we are all TMAs. A bit of a challenge, but my next slide. So we platform called GoMass, and underneath that platform, TMA 13 individual platform. Slide here, we each have our own membership underneath those platforms. Look and feel as well. Broad net that we, and like I said, we have 13 this one, but even just a couple months that the few we've started to really see the summary of sort of what Commute can do. It allows us to kind of collectively look at our impact as an industry and make the case for future funding of TMAs by doing this jointly. So we're excited to see what we'll be able to do with using this platform as a group. And I will leave it there for any questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Allison, for sharing about the work that you're doing there in the Boston area. Really inspiring ways you've got folks together. I do think it's helpful that TMA for folks that might not be familiar with it. It's definitely a creative way to address some of those transportation issues. I guess, one question that I would have is if you were starting this process with forming the Masscommute sort of combined nonprofit, again from the beginning, what advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now, having been through that process? Anything that you would your current self to tell your self or something like that?
I think we've gone iterations since the beginning of staffing and versus volunteer. So that's a constant struggle I think that we have with in terms of leadership. At the moment, we actually have the management of Masscommute outsourced through a consulting firm. So just one of the things I would advise if other groups are looking to kind of form a similar collaboration is to think about the responsibilities, in terms of who volunteers versus paid staff. Obviously funding comes into play with that, but that's certainly been something I think has evolved for us over time.
Thank you. And from Stacy, Masscommute is funding donations now. The state funding staff.
Because I'm reading the chat. I'm not hearing as well right now, but is what is the funding model for Go Masscommute? So each we have one joint license, and then each TMA pays into that license based on the size of the TMA and the number of members. So we share the cost of the RideAmigos contract. And then in terms of the funding model for Masscommute as a whole, we each pay dues into the organization. And then for something like the RideAmigos platform, that's paid separately, as I mentioned, by the size of the TMA. But the overall funding for the organization is a dues-based model.
Are there any other ways that the TMAs share resources?
This is the first sort of joint programming that we've done in terms of like service resources. We definitely have done in the past joint events. We do a bicycle challenge every year jointly across the TMAs where we compete with other TMAs and within business sectors. So our hospitals within different areas will compete with each other, and our small businesses, large businesses categories will compete on a bicycle challenge. And then we've also done an employer reward recognition program that we do every year called the Eco Awards, where we highlight those folks who are doing great work on the private sector. And we have different awards categories. So we do that jointly. So it's more been programming. This is sort of the first service delivery. RideAmigos platform is the first one of those that we've done.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Allison. It's I appreciate your work with the Boston group and also sharing the story of collaboration as an inspiration for others. It's really great to be able to share things that we find that are working.